All right, today we're doing something a bit different. We're going to put UK democracy on the examination table. Think of it like a full health check. We're going to look at its vitals, check for any worrying symptoms, and see if we can get a clear diagnosis on its overall condition. So let's get right into it.
Okay, so where do we start with a health check like this? Well, we've got to look at the most obvious symptom, right? The one that got us thinking about this in the first place. This kind of general feeling that something might be, well, seriously wrong. It's a big question for sure. Is UK democracy actually in crisis? You hear it a lot, don't you? You see the headlines about political scandals, you hear people talk about feeling totally disconnected from politicians, and you can't help but wonder if the whole system is just fundamentally unwell. But look, instead of just guessing, let's actually look at some cold, hard data.
So voter turnout. It's probably one of the clearest vital signs we have for democratic engagement. And this chart, well, it shows a pretty worrying trend. If you look back historically, after the war, turnouts were consistently over 75%. That was the norm. But then, boom, we see this dramatic drop, hitting an all-time low of just 59.4% in 2001. And yeah, it's recovered a little bit since then, but we're still nowhere near those old highs.
And you know, this whole thing has a name. It's often called a participation crisis. It's the term experts use when a really significant chunk of the population just stops taking part in the political process. So, for our health check, this is symptom number 1. It's a big one.
But a symptom like a participation crisis, it doesn't just pop up out of nowhere, right? To figure out if it's just a minor cold or a sign of something much deeper, we first have to understand the system's basic anatomy, its blueprint. So how is UK democracy actually supposed to work?
Okay, first up, you've got what's called direct democracy. Think of this as the purest form of democracy. It's where the citizens themselves make the big policy decisions directly. The most obvious example? A referendum. Everyone gets a direct vote on one specific issue, and that vote goes straight to the final result. Then, on the flip side, there's representative democracy. This is where we, the citizens, elect people, like our MPs, to go and make decisions on our behalf. They're supposed to represent our interests. And this is the main system we use here in the UK for, running the country day to day.
So neither system is perfect, right? There are always trade-offs, and this comparison here leaves them out really nicely. Direct democracy? The big pro is that it gives every single vote equal weight. Awesome. The con? It can be totally impractical when you've got a massive country with millions of people. Now, representative democracy is way more efficient, and it has built-in protections for minority rights. But, and this is the kicker, it can lead to exactly what we were talking about before, that feeling of being disconnected, which can lead to, you guessed it, reduced participation. This little flowchart here is a great way to see the difference. It really simplifies it. With direct democracy, look, it's a straight line from you, the citizen, to the decision. Simple. But with representative democracy, we stick a whole other layer in the middle. The representatives. We give them the power to act for us. It's just a fundamentally different blueprint for how power flows. Okay, let's get back to that participation crisis and really dig in. I think to get why it's such a big deal that people aren't voting today, you have to look back. You have to understand the incredible struggle it took to win that right in the first place. Because, let's be honest, for most of British history, the vast majority of people had absolutely no say at all. And this timeline really puts it into perspective, showing just how recent all of this is. The right to vote for everyone, it wasn't just handed over. It was a long, bitter, hard-fought battle. You see the steps here. Many working-class men in 1867, then women finally getting the same voting rights as men in 1928, and it wasn't until 1969 that the voting age was lowered to 18. Every single one of those steps was a huge fight. And that fight, it had a very real, very human face. I mean, just look at this incredible photo of the suffragette leader Emmeline Pankhurst being arrested. It's such a stark reminder of what people went through. They chained themselves to railings, they went on hunger strikes, they were thrown in jail, all for that one fundamental right to have a voice in how their country is run. Which, when you think about that struggle, makes this next number, well, just so striking. 32%. In the 2017 general election, that's roughly how many people who could vote just didn't. Almost a third of the electorate. We're talking millions of people whose right to vote was fought for so fiercely, deciding to stay home. And that really brings us to the crucial question, why?
So maybe the diagnosis isn't as simple as a participation crisis. Maybe it's not that simple. What if people aren't actually disengaged? What if they're just engaging in a different way? Let's explore another avenue people use to try and influence politics: pressure groups.
Okay, let's take a look at an insider group first. A perfect example is the British Medical Association, the BMA. They've got access to the halls of power, they have credibility, they use solid scientific evidence, they lobbied MPs and peers directly, kind of behind the scenes. And what was the result? A huge win. They successfully campaigned for that 2015 ban on smoking in cars with kids. A really clear, tangible victory.
All right, now let's pivot to a completely different approach. If the BMA is all about quiet influence on the inside, this image, well, this is a challenge from the outside. There's no backroom lobbying here. This is public, it's loud, and it's confrontational. This was the Occupy movement. They literally set up camp right in the heart of London's financial district to protest corporate greed. Now, unlike the BMA, their goals were really broad, very idealistic. They weren't pushing for one specific new law. So what happened? Well, they were incredibly successful at raising awareness and getting people talking, really shaping the public debate. But they didn't get any concrete policy changes. It just goes to show there's more than one way to participate, and they have very different outcomes. So it doesn't matter if you're voting, lobbying behind the scenes, or protesting on the streets, what actually protects your right to do any of that? Well, that brings us to the legal foundations, what you could call the immune system of a democracy, our fundamental rights. You know, the rights we have as citizens in the UK weren't just invented overnight. They've been built up over centuries. I mean, we're talking all the way back to the Magna Carta in 1215. That's the document that first said, hey, even the king isn't above the law. And fast forward to our time, you have really key legislation like the Human Rights Act in '98 and the Equality Act in 2010 that have cemented these protections for the modern world. And that Human Rights Act, it gives us some really concrete, legally enforceable shields. These aren't just vague, abstract ideas. We're talking about your right to a fair trial, your freedom to say what you think, your ability to protest peacefully, and your protection from being detained for no good reason. I mean, this stuff is the absolute bedrock of a functioning democracy. This quote here really nails the traditional British way of thinking about freedom. It's a concept known as negative rights. And the basic idea is this: you are free to do absolutely anything unless there is a specific law that explicitly says you can't. It's this powerful default to freedom mindset that has really shaped the whole legal culture of the country. So after all that, what's the final diagnosis from our health check? Well, the vital signs, they definitely show some worrying symptoms, especially that low voter turnout. You could say the system is wounded, for sure. But at the same time, it's also proven to be incredibly resilient. It has strong foundations, these deep-rooted protections, and a really vibrant culture of participation that goes way beyond just ticking a box every few years. And that kind of leaves us with one final question to chew on. Our world is changing so fast, right? The way we communicate, the way we engage with ideas, it's all evolving. So in this age of social media, online petitions, and clicks, what does it truly mean to participate? What does being an active citizen even look like anymore? And what's it going to look like in the future? That's really something for all of us to think about.